Welcome back to Black Pulse. We're talking to Mr. TLawrence, who's the Executive Director of the Tennessee Housing Development Agency, and Ms. DDumas, who's the President of DDumas Realty in town here. Before we had our break, Mr. Lawrence, we were talking about the homeless in Nashville, and I would like to sort of follow that up because there have been several recent reports in the newspaper dealing with the homeless population in Nashville. More important, there has been a legislative study that was done by Senators Haney and I think Representative Robinson dealing with the homeless population. And that has revealed that approximately 5% of the homeless in Nashville, well, in the state of Tennessee, really did not wish to be on the streets. And it tended to indicate that instead of the popular conception of the homeless being shiftless and unable to do anything, it also pointed out that there were just a whole variety of reasons that people did not have housing. And I think in reference to one of those comments, you said that there was not a shortage in housing, but there was a problem in terms of money. And I'd like for you to follow that up and to give us as much information as you possibly can, if you could.
That's correct. This spring, the General Assembly passed a joint resolution creating an ad hoc committee to gather facts and try to find some solution for housing for the homeless. And right now the findings are very preliminary. THDA has been one agency involved along with a number of others to gather information for the committee, and there's been actually about 2 official committee meetings to gather this information. And I think what we have come to preliminary conclusion is that there's not really a shortage of housing per se for the homeless, but there are other circumstances which cause these individuals to be homeless. Part of it's because of the institutionalization of the mentally ill. Then we have the problem with people who are drug dependent and are not able to be employed to afford housing. Then we've got the problem of people who are in a transitional situation where they lost their job for whatever reason and are not able to afford a home. And therefore, that's the reason, as far as THDA is concerned, that we say that it's not necessarily a shortage of housing units. There are housing units there. They need to be matched up in some way with the people who are homeless. And when I say the problem is money, that's pretty much the typical buzzword in the real estate industry, is you can solve any housing problem with money. And so ultimately that's going to be the solution. But really the problem is what is going to be the source of this.
Of the money.
Of the money. And this money is going to have to go into resources other than just the construction of housing. I think a lot of it has to do with just providing information to individuals who are homeless as to how they can obtain the housing, for one thing. And then, of course, there's going to have to be a way to pay for it. And in my opinion, and I think this is where the committee is going to come out, and I don't want to be presumptuous, but you know, I am in the housing business, that this is going to have to come from the private sector. I don't think the government is necessarily going to be the ultimate source. We'll be the facilitator. But when I say the private sector, I'm not talking about businesses per se, realtors or contractors. I'm talking about private non-profit organizations such as the Salvation Army or the Union Rescue Mission, and I think primarily churches will be the ultimate solution to this problem.
But now I think all of these organizations, even in the city of Nashville, are somewhat overworked in terms of what they are trying to do. And according to this report, there were some 4,000 homeless throughout the state of Tennessee, with 1,000 in Chattanooga, 1,000 in Knoxville, 670, I think, in Memphis, and the equal number in Chattanooga. Those were the general figures, but it all boiled down to approximately 1,000 people. Now, from what we've heard in reference to the homeless population in Nashville, the Union Rescue Mission, the Salvation Army, and of course we had Captain White and his group on at one time, and they simply indicated that they were simply overworked in terms of what they could possibly do. And many people would also indicate that one reason that there's a deficit in terms of the available housing is because the federal government has cut back in terms of helping to subsidize housing. And so with those problems, it's difficult to understand exactly how that could come about.
You're correct. That's exactly right, what you're saying. And we discussed earlier that the problems that are going to arise from tax reform and deficit reduction. I think the government, in terms of not just housing for the homeless, but housing for low income and for the poor, is going to become the facilitator of this and not necessarily the provider. And to answer what the question you really rose is, I don't think we know the answer right now, but that's going to be our job, is to find the answer, and that's what we're trying to do as far as homeless. But I think we're going to see in the future, in the not distant future at all, that we've got to find a lot of solutions to housing for low-income people.
Very good. What impact do you think the tax codes will probably have on the housing industry from your perspective?
Okay, it's a little early to be specific because the actual tax reform bill hasn't passed, but I think we can see as indicators through the Graham-Rudman-Hollings legislation, which is being implemented in a de facto manner, that the government is getting out of the housing business, is what it boils down to. As far as housing as an investment, in the past it's been a tax-driven profit-type investment, and that's over. In the future, housing is going to have to generate a profit just as if you bought a stock or a bond. And that's not necessarily bad, but it's going to cause some short-term dislocations. And I'm afraid the people that are going to suffer the most are the low-income people. And, I hate to sound willy-nilly, but we don't know what the solutions are right now. We're trying to find them vigorously. Do
you think that we're going through that dislocation now, and that's one of the reasons that we have so many homeless across the state of Tennessee?
Well, the problems of the housing for the homeless, I think, is we're just beginning to recognize it. I think it's existed for some time, and it sort of ebbs and flows depending on the economy. Right now, the economy is pretty strong, so I think the housing for the homeless is going to get worse. But certainly tax reform and the government's effort at tax or budget deficit reduction are going to have a significant impact on both housing for the low-income people and the homeless.
Very good. Mr. Dumas, recently there were